mean, some people do this audibly, they talk to themselves. Sort of, sometimes we do that on the bus or wherever we might be. But we've all got that thing going on inside all the time. And what Vygotsky proposed was that poetry engages both our propensity as human beings, as we are social animals, to talk externally and internally, and engages both of those planes of thinking, because it sort of merges both our private thoughts, but also what we might want to say publicly at the same time. He also talked about language being opaque, inner speech being opaque. That's not the same as obscure, but the same, it means to do with language being quite layered, where you can say one thing, but you can be saying another thing at the same time, and that's where things like metaphor, imagery, and simile, personification, all those sorts of things come in, where we can be talking about going through a door, but actually, are we talking about going through a door, or are we talking about, seeing new things for the first time, or having rich experiences, or sort of imagining worlds, or whatever. He came up with this lovely phrase, agglutination. He was very interested in the way that I'm not an expert on German, but the way that in the German language you can bolt on noun after noun after noun onto a key word and sort of extend it. And he came up with this idea of agglutination, like you bolt on lots of words to make one really long word. And out of that, he came up with a theory that poetry is, in essence, which I've just been explaining, and we did a bit about it as well, in its essence, playful and sort of almost disruptive in the way that you can be pretending to say one thing, but really you're saying another. And he talked then finally about the words becoming saturated with sense, where if you just take in a poem, if you take out one word, it can actually alter the meaning of the poem altogether. If you take out a line of the poem, it's like all the words, all the rhythms, all the images all working together. And he called that being saturated with sense. Like if you put a poem in a different form from how it's presented, if you take the rhythm out or the rhyme out, it's a different poem. It means something entirely different. So we thought about learning being social in nature, having it's to do with internal and external speech, and we drill on Bakhtin as well, who we've already talked about a little bit, the dialogic imagination, and I've just already said a little bit about him. And there's loads of people who are referenced here on this slide who've been influenced by Bakhtin's thinking. And really the key idea is that you never, as soon as you're writing something down on a text, or you're reading a text by another person, your language, the language you're reading or the language you're writing, is already what he calls populated with the intentions of others. So it's never neutral. It's always based on or catching an echo of what somebody else has said before, or written before, or thought before, which in a way is really sort of encouraging, I think, because it takes the pressure off about having to be original. So in the break, I was talking with, don't know your name, sorry, over there, but talking about Leonard Cohen and William Blake, and I didn't know this. I knew a little bit about Leonard Cohen, but apparently he was absolutely sort of obsessed with William Blake, and based a lot of his early work on what Blake had done. And that's a really nice example of that. And there are countless other examples of how people have done that in poetry through the years. Other ways of saying that same thought are also on this slide. So these writers who we draw on for our theory, Schultz and Fecko, this idea of the language in the classroom intermingling with what's outside the classroom. This notion in the next bit down where it talks about a dialogic tide. So this idea of sort of like the waters coming in and then sort of going back out, this sort of recursive process that's constant, it's sort of never ending. So we're always responding, both what's going to who is, if you like, near us in our social worlds as writers, and what is out there as writers. So there's a sense of we're always responding to what's in here, if you like, our feelings, our emotions, our experience, the stuff that makes us who we are, but we're always responding to how might this be said based on what I know about poetry and how it's been said before. And Nystrand and his all texts have this sort of dialogic capacity. As soon as, as I said, as soon as you're reading something or listening to what someone else has said, you're already in dialogue with it, because the people that wrote it have been in dialogue with what went before them. So it's this kind of like massive sort of, there's a great programme on Radio 4 called The Echo Chamber. It's all about poetry by a guy, really fantastic poet called Paul Farley. And in that sense, all poetry is like a gigantic echo chamber. So, final bit of theoretical framework, and this is much less to do with Russian psychologists than with what a poet has said. And we want to develop some of our theory based on what poets have said as well, and you'll see some of them in a minute. Lovely, brilliant American poet called Robert Pinsky, former US poet laureate. I've just put a hyperlink to, in case anyone wants to see these slides ever again, but if you don't, it's no problem. But there's a great project which is called the Favourite Poem Project in the States. You just Google that and you'll find it. It's a bit like the Poetry Archive that we have in this country, which was set up by former laureate we had, Andrew Motion, where basically ordinary Americans read to camera, or a mobile phone, their favourite poem. It's nothing more complicated than that. It's a beautiful project. It's really quite emotional to hear them. But he has this, great quote from a book he wrote about poetry, where he talks about poets not needing much more than just this need to answer. Now that doesn't mean answer an individual all the time. It could be not answering an individual, like I have a grandfather, my grandfather dies, I want to express my sorrow, my grief, my bereavement about my grandfather dying. It could be as basic and as simple as that. Or it could be something a bit wider than that, a bit more social, to do with there is this situation going on in the world about a particular issue, like I think of Seamus Heaney, Nobel laureate, who won the Nobel Prize, and he wrote early on in his career a lot about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. But very obliquely, he didn't sort of tackle them head on, but he felt this need, and he wrote about this a lot, about this need to somehow give an answer to the situation that was going on in Northern Ireland without coming down necessarily on one side or the other. And that was for him very important, not to say this poem is now going to sort out the problems in Northern Ireland. So Robert, and sometimes there is no answer. There is no answer. We write our poem about our grandfather, we write our poem about the Northern Ireland Troubles, and nothing comes back. It doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't solve the problem, but that isn't the point. The point is we feel this need to answer whatever the question is at that particular point. All of this is to do with what we think of as poetry writing as a socially constructed process. And we really, we're convinced that poetry, that we've got this sort of romantic notion of poets. I showed you Chatterton lying on his bed, no one's interested. We think that far from that, completely the opposite, that poets are dependent on the contexts that they come from. So Seamus Heaney's development as a writer, if we go back to his example, was utterly formed by him being part of a group of poets who he happened to know and work with at the time. There's a photo coming up of him later on. And the same would be true of Robert Pinsky, and it's the same for Sue as a poet, it's the same for me as a poet. And it's all to do with who we've read, who we've been in touch with, what other poets we know, who we've read at which points in our lives, and how we've put, if you like, those inspirations into practice in our lives by writing out of those different kinds of experiences. And as we get older, as we change, those motivations and those identities that we have as writers change. So that I think one's identity as a writer, as a poet, I'm not the same poet now. I'm just about to publish my 5th collection. I'm nowhere near like being the same poet that I was when I started out. It just wouldn't be possible. And we also think, as a result of poetry being a social activity, we also think of poetry as something that is transformational. Now, I've said just a minute ago, I'm sort of contradicting myself in a way, but I've said that we don't think that writing a poem necessarily about my grandfather or about the troubles in Northern Ireland, about those two sort of kinds of thing, personal and social, transformational in the sense of changing what happens in Northern Ireland, or changing necessarily how my grief, goes on being expressed by me. But it changes something because it's not the same afterwards. As soon as I write a poem about something, I have the experience of the thing I'm writing about, the grief, the sorrow, the joy, whatever it might be. But then the poem becomes part of that experience. So that there's a transformation there. Even if I go on being sad or go on being happy or whatever it might be, it's like those two things become in dialogue with each other as well. The actual experience and the experience of writing the poem, the experience, if you like, of the poem being in the world. Those two things interact and become dialogical with each other as well. And so we think there's a sort of emotional aspect and social aspect to writing poetry, which we think has been underestimated. We don't think we're the first people to say this. Lots of people have said this in different sorts of ways, but we think it's been underestimated. So there's just a few more slides before I finish. And the remaining slides are all to do with these guys. Schultz-Thecke developed this amazing model of, it's a really long paper of writing development. And we have just drawn, we think their ideas are great, and have drawn on their key ideas, the brief summary before I finish, of their main ideas in relation to poetry writing development. So we think that poetry writing development is affected, if you like, or can be seen through and in all of these things, through historical context, in local contexts. It's reflective of what goes on inside classrooms, about pedagogy, about teachers. It's shaped by social interactions. I'll say a bit more about that. And our identities as writers, which I've just touched on briefly. And we finally think that it's not a linear thing. So I said a moment ago that the poet I was in 1996, when my first book came out, I have not developed in a sort of straight line as a poet. There's been lots of, stops and starts and failures and great books that never got published in between then and now. Because I sort of ditched them because they weren't any good and so on. So let's get into the detail a bit more of the final few slides before I finish. So the impact of social and historical context on writers, if you like, that weight of history is on us all the time. So in a sense, there's always other poets in the room whenever you're writing. They're always on your shoulder. You can't get rid of that. But it's also to do with power and power relationships. They can enable us and they can constrain us, and that depends on things like this great phrase here, the watchful gaze of people who write curriculums, governments, publishers, Ofsted, who measure attainment in school, and that has an effect on the activities that go on inside classrooms. So I can tell you anecdotally that there is research as well, not quite scientific, but there is research that says that actually since we've had league tables in this country and children's writing has been measured according to various criteria for their end of year 6 SATs, as we call them, or national tests, fewer and fewer teachers are doing or bothering to teach poetry in primary schools. That's both reading and writing, because it's not measured, it's not in the SATs, therefore we don't need to teach it. So that would be an example of the watchful gaze of curricula having an impact on what goes on inside classrooms. And when they are taught, a good colleague of mine, I've just been working with her on another project, Teresa Granger, now Kremen, talks about poems being like caged lions, where we sort of visit them in cages, but we don't really sort of experience what the poem is about. We sort of examine it, but we don't really sort of enter into its emotional world. There's a really good, we've drawn on a case study for this part of our theory as well, by Compton Lilly, who talks about this little boy, this young boy, Peter, an adolescent African-American writer from a large urban area in America. And she watches him over a longitudinal study over a very long period of time when he's writing all sorts of things and engaging with all sorts of different kinds of people. But she said actually what holds Peter and kids like him back is not having access to what Bourdieu calls the field of play, not the same access to things like higher education or the language to access certain aspects of education because of his background. So we think that there's always this weight of history, and that can be a negative thing, it can be a positive thing, but it's always there when people sit down to write. And people like Seamus Heaney, he had this tremendous sense of history coming after people like Yeats and Synge and all the great Irish writers who'd written before him, and he felt a great sort of that he was in conversation with them as well as to his own particular context. Just to go back to his example. So we also think that there's this impact of local context. So another case study by these guys, Andrews and Smith, they did a case study of another adolescent American writer, Sean, who took part in what we call spoken word activities. He was a performer, and he was something of a sort of politician as well, because his writing was very much a very strong social context, social conscience, I should say. And he found that, they found that watching him, that what was most important to him wasn't really what went on inside the classroom, but his friendship groups, where he would collaborate with other writers in sort of various networks, crossing boundaries between groups that sort of did and didn't belong in school. And the importance of the feedback that he got really changed the way that he wrote. So that changed the way that he redrafted his poems, taking out sort of phrases and lines out of old poems and putting them in new poems for new effects, but also changing his goals, like what he wants to do with his poetry. So they were all looking up to Sean because he was quite sort of figurehead, a leader amongst all of them, but he didn't realise that until they said, actually, what you need to really do in your writing is to really say something. You're speaking on behalf of all of us, because there's injustice going on here, and we want you to put it out there. And so that really changed how he thought of himself as a young writer. Again, so there's that knowledge, there's that sense, of from the sort of Vygotsky and I perspective of sort of inner speech moving towards outer speech. So I have this thing that I think I need to say, but it's being impacted on by what other people are telling me about it, and that sort of creates a social need in the writing as well. Social composing processes we think are really important, and if you sign up for a creative writing degree in this country, certainly, and in the States, certainly, you will join at some point, usually immediately, a workshop, what we call a writing workshop, usually between 10 and 15 people around a table, where you will workshop each other's work. A workshop goes from being a noun, it's a thing you attend, but it's a verb as well, where you actively workshop each other's work, where you'll be set tasks where you write in the workshop, and where you'll be giving and receiving feedback on your work. And that goes back to this guy called Donald Graves, and he introduced to the American system, but also many teachers in this country in the 1980s, this idea of writing workshops taking place in school. You don't see it so much now in schools. In a way, schools in the 1980s in this country were way ahead of what has become known as the creative writing movement, which is now happening in universities. But it's inherently a social dialogic thing where, I might read a couple of lines or my entire poem, and immediately I'm getting feedback, not just from the teacher in the room, but from the other people, like, I don't really get that bit, or that bit doesn't work, or why did you do that, or I think you need to change that, or, and so on. And there's this sense of, when you're in a workshop, you're writing, but you're always writing and reading at the same time. So there's usually some form of piece of work which you're being asked to respond to, again, going back to that notion of the dialogic nature of writing. So, in a very jokey way, we did everybody, but in a sort of writing workshop, you'll be looking at a poem, you'll be thinking, actually, this could be a model for my own writing. how am I going to take some of the lessons out of this poem and put it into my own work? So the idea of working alongside people as fellow practitioners, we are critics, but we're not critics. We are not in competition with each other. We're trying to make each other's work as good as it can be. And that has real implications for teachers in this country, because a lot of them don't feel very confident in poetry, or aren't really confident in themselves as writers as well. And we've just been doing a really interesting project called Teachers as Writers, which has just come to the end of its funding, just in that we're writing the results up now, lots of mostly qualitative interview data with them about how they don't feel that confident writing alongside children, but because of what we've done with them, taking them on writing residentials where they've done this process of being in workshops, they're now beginning to feel that actually they can do that and model the writing process to the kids that they're working with. And that sort of leads on to how we think writing, people write well when they're in community with each other. The benefits of teamwork, we think, is a really good way of summing it up. We think that you're always going to want to write more and write better than you can when you know that there's someone else on the other side of the conversation, whether that's in the room with you, or it could be someone again down the line at the end of an email. So again, going back to my Teachers as Writers project, although we wrote this paper before the Teachers as Writers, but what we've done in the Teachers as Writers bears this out. Lots of the writers that we interviewed who worked on the project with us in these classrooms and with these teachers consistently said to us that in their early lives it was those relationships they had with people who were a bit more experienced or a bit more expert than them, who helped them feel confident and they had something to say, and they would often stay in dialogue with, just sometimes once a year, so once. Some of them talked about putting poems in the old-fashioned way in an envelope and sending them in the post, but a lot of them on email now, or even via just texting each other as well, just sending work to each other, this sense of there is someone else who it matters to me that this poem is heard by, and they're having a massive impact on their sense of the poem going somewhere, even if it never got published, even if it didn't become famous or prize-winning or in a book or anything. That wasn't really the point. It was just the idea that there'll be someone out there receiving it, as it were. And again, another case study from Catherine Schultz from America. This young boy called Roderick, and another case study by Anne Haas Dyson, where with a really young girl called Tiona, again from urban areas in the United States. These two amazing case studies that we looked at, where they've seen that process going on, where in Roderick's case, he has that sort of sense of, he's not emailing his poems or putting them in brown envelopes and sending them off, but he's sort of inviting other people into his network, so he's beavering away on his stories and on his poems, and he's using what other people are writing in his network to become part of what he ends up writing. And in Tiona's case, it's much more of a performative thing. So going back to cardiovascular disease, they're doing sort of skipping rhymes at playtime, and there's this sort of constant sense when you read about Anne Haas Dyson's work with Tiona, it's this constant sense of her sort of using her language from outside of the classroom, from at home, from street culture, if you like, inside the school, but not really in the classroom, always at playtime or in break time, through skipping rhymes and jingles and rhymes that they would do with each other, always based around physical activity and movement. And we find that in this way, writers create communities. That's kind of sort of posh way of describing it, but that's what we think is going on. Tiona drawing in other people around her, and Roderick drawing in people around him. That's what's going on. And what we question, what we wonder, is how far these unofficial literacies from outside, from street culture, from sort of secret notebook writing that Roderick did, we wonder how far those unofficial literacies are valued and given privilege by a school? And that's quite a big question, especially in this context that we are in England, certainly at the moment, with such a high stakes context, by which I mean schools are measured on the scores they get for year 6, year 6 SATs writing and so on. And how far that privilege is, if you like, an official school kind of writing that isn't really anything to do with these other kinds of writing. And that's a big, I think, a really big question of, if you like, the ecosystem of language in schools at the moment. And here's just some photos of, so some very, obviously, these are sort of everyday kids in America, and these are the sort of world-leading poets I'm about to show you. So I'm trying to say that these things are true for the case studies that we've read, these things in the literature that we find, but this is true for things like world-leading poets. So at the top over here we've got Elizabeth Bishop and Robert Lowe, and you can see the sort of regard they have for each other. What's really interesting about those two is that they only met a handful of times in their life, and yet they corresponded for their entire lives. They met, I think, as many times as the fingers on one hand. I remember reading once. It might have been more than that, but I don't think it was very much more. They were often living very far apart, America, South America, great distances between them. But they did meet, obviously, but most of their relationship was conducted via letter, no email in those days. We're talking about the 1950s and 60s. And there's a giant volume of their letters, the name of which has just literally left my head, and I can't remember what it's called. A huge volume of letters which you can find. It's an amazing piece of work. And they supported each other in their writing over all of that time. Down here we've got two other famous examples. I've talked about Seamus Heaney. This was called the Belfast Group, or sometimes referred to as just the group. So over here we've got Seamus Heaney, there you are. And then we've got John Hewlett, not so well known, but a great Northern Irish poet. Derek Mark, who's still with us. And Michael Longley is also still with us. And then over here we've got this really amazing group. In fact, three of the people, it's really this triangle of people here who are the key people in the photo in terms of the work that they produced. This guy over here is called Bill Berkson. He's not part of he was part of this sort of New York scene that they were all part of. But we tend to refer to these people as the New York poets. They were from New York and they were poets. It's really not complicated. So we've got John Ashbery, who's still with us. Frank O'Hara, who died tragically in his 30s, I think, maybe 40s, but not very old. He was killed in a beach buggy accident on Long Island, tragically very young. And this amazing writer, probably my favourite of all of them, Kenneth Coke, and they all influenced each other. And Kenneth Coke has written beautifully about their influence on each other. He talked about them being like a team. I mean, Seamus Heaney's written about the Belfast Group as well, but the New York poets, I think there's something really zany and amazing about them, because they weren't just a group of poets. They knew artists, they knew the people who knew the artists and the gallery owners. There was this whole social milieu that they worked in. And Kenneth Coke wrote this lovely little essay about being a New York poet, because they kind of knew they were special. They had this feeling of, we're a team together, and they weren't competing with each other, but like when you're in a good team, you raise each other's standards. And he said we were like Vikings. If one of us failed, we all failed. And I love that sense of, it really mattered to them what each other was doing in their work. So, it is younger writers. We see this social model affecting younger writers in classrooms, but we also see this social model going on in, world-leading literature as well. We're nearly at the end. A couple more slides, I think, to go. We also see this social model of writing really having a big influence on identity. I've just mentioned a little bit to do with that already. And I'm just going to read out this first quote on the slide, because I think it's really powerful. Writing is an act of identity. So when you write, I am creating an identity by the process of doing some writing, in which people align themselves with socioculturally shaped possibilities of selfhood. So if I'm writing a poem, I am sort of aligning myself with the idea of who a poet is, or what a poet is, or what a poet could be, what a poem can be. I'm aligning myself with the possibilities that have been created before I sat down to write by the millions and thousands of other people who've also sat down to write, writing poems, who've come before me. So I'm aligning myself at some point, and then there's many different identities within that. Am I a socially engaged poet? Am I someone who's writing sort of in a confessional way about my own private experience and so on? And again, going back to this notion of Bourdieu he talks about the fields of play, in other words, people having access to the domain, if you like, or the field or the territory of poetry. There's this lovely quote here by G. If you don't have access to the social practice, you don't get in the discourse. You don't have it. And so that's quite a powerful thing for teachers to sort of take on board for themselves, because in a way they, at the moment of talking about poems or getting kids to write in classrooms, they are the people who says you can come in, or you know, either come in through the door into this world, this space of dialogicity, of social interaction, or not. That's a very powerful role that teachers have. Teresa Craven, who I mentioned before, who I've been working with recently, talks about the risk-taking and the uncertainty that's involved, and the disorientation of teachers becoming writers as they write along. So it's a very small study that she did of just 3 teachers, and you can see 2006, and it's taken all this time for us to get to tag onto her work and do a new project, basically with the same idea but with a much bigger sample size. But we found some of the same things that teachers, as they become writers, as they try out writing for themselves, even in a group, even with lots of support, even with lots of help from researchers like me and other poets and other writers, still find it quite a risk to write alongside their kids in the classroom, because it disorients them, because they're not sure where it fits in with their teaching identity. So there's something about writing and teaching, we think, which are both complementary but also perhaps in opposition to each other. We haven't quite worked that one out yet, but we're sort of grappling with what these quantitative data are telling us. Sue, my colleague who's co-written this with me, has done a lovely paper which has just been published about spoken word performers in London. So ordinary teenage kids from South East London, who through their spoken word activities have discovered, if you like, a new identity that is both the identity they walk into school with, but it's a new identity of being spoken word performers, and it's a really positive paper, because it sort of shows how things can change for people when they are given that access to the discourse. You know, when the teacher, when the people working with them says, yes, come into this dialogic space, you can do it, you can have a go, you can make a difference. That's a really powerful story. Finally, on the 6 slides, and I think there's just a diagram to finish with very tiny writing, I just remembered. We think of poetry as this amazing, we hypothesize poetry as this amazing ludic, i.e. playful space, which scavenges bits and pieces from other sort of discourses. So even that everybody, verybody thing that I did with you was an example of that, scavenging sort of like slapstick comedy, but also scavenging rhythm and rhyme as well. So it's a wonderful art form. It's so sort of free-flowing poetry, and ludic is such a great word. It's so playful, and it can really literally be anything. But it's always in conversation, as I've been saying all the way through this talk, always in conversation with what other people have written before. There's always this sense of, oh, I can do this because other people have done something similar before, but I'm just going to take it a little bit further. And my PhD study, which I wrote up for a chapter for a book a few years ago, this one here, up here, I did a PhD study of sort of 18 months of working with these kids in Exeter, here where we are. And one of the things that I found in that study was how hard they found, if you like, the cognitive demands on them to write poetry, to come up with content, to talk to, if you like, to feel confident in writing about their own experiences, about their own lives. And so their progress, it wasn't like I sort of had a marking set of criteria like you do for the Year 6 SATs. I found it very hard to give them feedback, but as the project went on, I was better at giving them feedback and saying, well, actually, is this, rather than saying this is a 5 out of 10 poem, which doesn't really mean anything, I was saying to them things like, well, is this what you wanted to do? What did you intend to do with this poem? Is this what you meant to do? What were you trying? What were the effects? Because if you did mean to make it nonsense, then that's great, you've achieved nonsense. But if you wanted to say something really moving and sort of sorrowful or happy or whatever, then that's not what you've done. So you need to. So I was trying to reflect back to them how I was hearing and receiving their poems. And for a lot of them, it was like they had to unlearn some of the stuff that they'd learned and spent hours and days and years learning in their other English lessons when they were writing prose. A lot of them, to start with, would write out their poems. Some of them never really got the hang of it. They would write out their poems as prose the whole time. They didn't really learn that poetry's got this kind of, what one writer's called the whiteness hedged off area, this white space at the end of the line. They never learned that. They just couldn't, for whatever reason, get their heads around it. And so that's what I'm talking about down here, where I sort of say about learners' organisational schemas. That's just a sort of posh cognitive way of saying, actually, they never really got the hang of how to organise their text on the page. Some of them did, most of them did, but some of them never did. So there's this kind of like what a poem looks like on the page, as well as what's going on inside it, the feelings, the emotions, the images, the content, if you like. And that's why it's demanding for children, because you've got all these different things. It's like, do you remember those old-fashioned entertainers who used to come on and walk around the stage spinning plates? Do you remember those? That used to be entertainment in the old days. I remember on the television, a man would come on, it was always a man, and spin plates, and then you'd get on Blue Peter. I remember watching that as a kid. And the idea was to get as many plates spinning at one time without the plates crashing to the floor. And in a way, that's what poetry writing is like for these young kids, because they're keeping so many mental plates spinning, and it's really hard for them to do. And because of that, we say poetry writing development, especially for younger learners, is a non-linear thing. So they can achieve a great poem one week, and the next week they're back to where they were even 2 or 3 weeks before, because they've not been able to remember how a poem looks. Final slide, okay. This is our model. I know that you won't be able to read any of them, so I'm just going to try and sort of say what I think is going on. There were lots of great diagrams that we looked at in our research to sort of create this new model of poetry writing as a socially contextualised process, which we quote in the paper, in the full-on paper, lots of other diagrams that other people have made of what they think is going on in writing. And we said what we liked about some of those models and what we didn't like, and then we created, but we thought at some point we've got to create our own. And so we've got, so in the middle here, we've got social context. It's the same idea as I've been saying all the way through the talk. Social context is really, really key. We've got different sorts of social contexts. We've got the classroom, we've got possibilities of writing online, like in wikis or in blogs. We've got the workshop thing, which I've talked about a bit. We talked about, I haven't used the word slam, but that's where you get spoken words going on, spoken word competitions where people compete with each other in their poems, and it's like this sort of clapometer, they get clapped on or clapped off. So slam competitions, and also at home. And you may have all these different social contexts going on. You may be affected one day by the classroom. The classroom may overlap with home, which may overlap with the slam, which may overlap with workshops. And individuals are affected by those different social contexts. Now, there are other social contexts as well, which is just some examples. I'm not saying those are the only ones out there. We talk about journeying. We've kind of got this sort of circular process going on. We call it journeying into the poem and journeying back through the poem. So the thing that goes basically round and round and round. So you may start at any one of these points, which may take you to journey back out through the poem or inside the poem. It's sort of, you're going round and round it the whole time, and you're sort of recursively tuning in at different points to what you need to, what you're receiving from other people, what you're receiving from these different contexts. What we might in the old days have called inspiration, like I've got an idea or a line. So you might like literally borrow a line from what someone else has said, which is in the literature of the young American kids we talked about, or needing to find an answer to a particular thing, whether it's a social question or a private thing or a thing in your own life, whatever it might be. And this recursive response to the need to answer keeps going round and round. Now, we don't think this is perfect. We don't think this is perfect, but we think it tries to encapsulate our model as it is at the moment. You've been really patient, and I really, really am grateful to you all for staying. I was just going to, I should have started with this joke. It's not really a joke, but before every poetry reading in history, there's always something that always needs to happen before the poetry reading starts, and this lecture is no different, which is that the organiser will come up to the poet and say, I think we'll just give it 2 more minutes, because there's 4 people in the room. And it's the same as when you talk about poetry as well. But I am so grateful to you for staying. Thank you for listening. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anthony. So I think we're here to close off the evening now, if that's all right. So brings us to the end of our first Research Uncovered Part 1. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to everyone that nominated these fantastic lecturers. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in at home. We should have another round of applause for both Bert and Anthony. And that's all from us. So if we want to catch the next part of Research Uncovered next week, that'll be in the XFI Henderson Lecture Theatre in the Business School. Starting at 7 o'clock again, with the 7 p.m. again with the same setup.